Hey, good morning. It's 3:39 a.m. It is May 3rd, and it's Saturday morning. Now, as I think I've mentioned this before, I don't really consider it morning until the sun rises, but still, I guess it's pretty late or it's pretty early depending on how you look at it. So, anyway, I woke up about an hour ago and when I woke up, I was this old cartoon popped into my mind. It's called Dicky Moe, and it was one of those old Tom and Jerry cartoons where there really isn't any voices in there except for like grunting noises and mumbling and stuff like that. But I guess some people look at it it's almost like a silent film, but I always found this particular cartoon interesting because we have this captain that's absolutely obsessed with catching Dicky Moe. Now, you're probably thinking Dicky Moe sounds a lot like Moby Dick or like a spin off of Moby Dick, and I believe that's what this cartoon was supposed to be spoofing on, right? But anyway, when I was younger, this cartoon, inspired me to kind of create this as a term, like, or a way of expressing my way of telling people that I was obsessed with something. So I'd be like, oh, I'm totally Dicky Moe about blah, 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 blah. I know it's corny, right? But the reason why this Dicky Moe cartoon popped into my head is because I realized that I am extremely obsessed with, my mental ability, my mental health as a result of everything that I've dealt with, the trauma that I've gone through, and that is related to, you know, the the bullying and the shock of coming to realize, that this was some sort of like, I don't know, it was a nightmare. Okay, it really was. And so, I think I tend to focus on this issue too much, more than I should. But then, I know they put me in isolation and force me into isolation, and they put you in situations where you have nothing to do but dwell on negativity. I mean, when I think of how dark um, this cloud is of, this kind of control and how sick, it has made people. And I know I'm not the only person who's talking about this because I've seen so many videos of people talking about the work life and how, how empty they feel. And it is very, it paints a dark cloud over the lives of other people. Like, people don't want to grow up in this state. They don't. They don't visualize, being in such a sad state of where there is nothing left to dream about, hope for, care about, or whatever, where there's just no motivation. And see, I understand when I think about, archons and demonic forces and how misleading, and the illusions that are created in order to trick people into desiring things that are usually very damaging to them. I had mentioned before when I was younger how some girls, are very competitive. Like if you liked a boy, then they wanted to jump in and hurry up and get that guy and, this sort of stuff. And I've seen women, throw their so-called friends under the bus, by taking their boyfriends and then rubbing it in their face and all this other stuff. And then it's funny when they end up being stuck with married to the guy that they stole, and they end up finding that he's abusive and they can't get out of their relationship because he's manipulating things behind the scenes. You know what I mean? It's crazy how people end up, fighting and kind of demanding their own enslavement and their own, leading to their own demise, And so, I've always realized, as I got older, as Maria Borden, I've seen people get into situations where, where didn't, how can I say this? Like they felt competitive about getting into a certain spot or a certain position. And, on my life, my work ethic, I think I was trying to work up to certain positions because I wanted to have the job stability. I wanted to see some sort of proof of my improvement and being able to provide for myself. Okay, I honestly do understand. And because, I must think like a 19th century person. I must. And people who come before that. Okay, I really do look at my skill set as something that needs to be like, perfected over time. And I am very content with my skill set, but I do look at what you do for a living as a profession. I do. Even if it's something as simple like, like being a receptionist, okay? It's all in the way that you make yourself indispensable. Okay, and I understand in the corporate world, people are dispensable, okay? But I'm talking about reliability, that sort of thing. So, I've always taken that seriously because, like I said, in order to feel um, confident, in order to be able to take care of myself, okay, like I said, I am somebody who realizes that I am not somebody who, I don't believe in making people carry the burden. Okay, I don't believe in doing that. And like I said, when people have the ability to do that, that is a nice thing, and um, they should have the right to say, what they can and cannot tolerate, or being able to put them, yeah, they should not be forced into being put into situations where they have no choice, okay, which creates a burden on them or whatever. Um, in this life, I believe that we're responsible for ourselves. I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, if I did something wrong, my parents could be held accountable. No one could be held accountable for my actions other than me. Okay. So, I never visualized, me being in a situation at 54, not being able to take care of myself. To be honest with you, I honestly thought I was going to die sometime in my 40s. Okay, I was really getting kind of burned out with all the drama going on in the early 2000s. Okay, so now I'm 54 years old, and I'm like, oh my God, uh, these people have literally destroyed everything I've worked for. You know what I mean? With their game playing and their manipulation and putting me in one spot. And see, and what it terrorized me so much is that, it ruined my work history. And I understand people don't care about work history anymore because, unfortunately, the work sector seems very political. It's like, so it was so political to the point of like, I feel as though I'm angry because I felt as though these people wasted my time. You know what I mean? Like, giving me things that were beneath my skill level. In order, because in their mind, your title means everything and blah 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 blah. Everybody's obsessed with class and whatever and impressing people. I feel like, this world is very disappointing to me. It's very dark. It's very twisted, and it's something that I shun, as much as I possibly can. Okay, I understand I have to go out into the world, but like I said, I don't have to like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. It is moral. I mean, when I think about how morally corrupt the world is, and how people are willing to betray their so-called loved ones, and the weird part is they have absolutely no concept of what love is. They don't. You know, I was talking about, people who produce children who don't really have any vision for them. They're just producing them just for the sake of producing them, or they might need them as some sort of commodity, whether they're getting welfare or whatever. You know what I mean? It's always like this. It's like there's such a lack of love, and this is why, you know, uh, I have come to hate the monetary system. I hate it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I understand I have to pay my bills. Okay, I mean, I do. So my view about things, of course, lies in balance. It's like I understand I have to have these things, but I don't have to love the world and what is associated with it. You know. Um, so, like, I think it's important for me, like, for example, when I'm talking about the moral reset and how I'm, taking, removing any form of spirituality in it. I'm speaking to people, in a way where I'm relating our psychological behavior patterns, and I'm also talking about legal issues, like legal terms, like I'm talking about murder, I'm talking about, the implications of certain crimes, right, that people do and they don't really think about it, or maybe they're just educating people on certain things. Also, people's parental responsibilities and this sort of stuff. um, and I find that, as I'm working through these things, I see that, we live in a very corrupt society, and I'm sad because, it's a deep down sad. Like, it's a sad that, like, it's hard to even articulate, because I think about how bleak life has become because of, the bizarre takeover, and how I believe that the idea behind it was something that was created by tricksters, a trickster deity or trickster god, that and this is something I cannot really go into in the moral reset. So when I talk about morals, I am speaking about things that relate specifically to the law. Like, you break the law, then you're obviously going to have to pay some sort of worldly consequence. And when we think about religion, the consequence is generally feared from, I suppose, right, God, right? Unfortunately, sometimes churches like to make or punish people and act as if this is some sort of act of God. And see, this is why I detest, the attitude that comes with organized religion. I'm not saying all people are like that. I do think that some people are sincere when they go into it, but it's, it's the big-headedness, it's the need for control. And in this case, I see that they have choked the lives out of so many people, including me, which is one of the reasons why I am Dicky Moe at this moment, right? And I'm always Dicky Moe about the same thing. It's the same old thing. It's like, I'm wondering in my mind, like, how in the world can people make any sort of living? How could people find any kind of joy that has been just squeezed out, And then they want to control what you do outside. And I'm not the only one who is affected by this, the menticide, and I understand that they had an agenda. I understand the population control, but it's like, can you imagine women being taken by force? The whole thing was just like, oh my God. People can be so obsessed with power that they don't even realize. They just want to be the winner so bad. They're not even thinking things through, which leads me to this whole issue of, the desire to have some sort of world order where, it seems as though the idea is to where people would be docile and just being able, unless of course people are happy with the situation, like, being in a so-called paradise, but a paradise for who? A paradise for who? You know what I mean? A paradise for, to me, it should be peace. You know what I mean? It should be something where there's harmony. And I understand that this is something that other people have, so-called prophets that somehow knew about the cloning system, and like I said, this is where I feel as though there's a manipulation that got brought into these ideas because, clones are a manipulated, a product, and if you want to look at it that way. So, I don't know. It seems as though this, it was an evil, it was an evil, the desire, or to allow your desires to get out of control. Like, there's nothing wrong with having goals, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to exert. If you're truly a leader, there is nothing wrong with wanting to lead people, especially if you feel as though you have something to offer and that it's a value and that you're right. You know what you're doing, right? But some people just want to be leaders because they want to be looked upon, as something great, and they want to have some sort of accolades or whatever, and I think there's nothing wrong with wanting worldly praise, but there's always a balance there. Like, everybody wants to take a bow. No one wants to be booed off stage. I mean, that's reality, okay? But at the same time, it's like, sometimes, it could be a trap. It can be a demonic trap. Just very much like, being tricked into, the things that led to where we are now. Like the destruction of, you know, um, mankind. Or I'm really getting tired now. It's like 3:55, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, how greed, greed, wanting things, and the things that we want are usually end up being extremely disappointing. Just like the girl who wants to betray her friend so she could steal her guy, so then the guy ends up being abusive to her. Or, somebody tries to trample over you to get the promotion and they end up hating their job because they work so many hours or whatever. It's always, it's always something, it always seems great in the beginning, but it ends up being the very thing that ruins your life. So at this point, I understand, how to be grateful. I'm very grateful for everything that I do have. And, I'm not somebody who needs to have, a mansion to live in. I don't need to have a fancy car to live in, to drive around in. But what I do need is I need escapism from a very dangerous world. Is there something else I wanted to say? I have been thinking a lot about, and when I say escapism, I don't believe in, okay, some people go crazy. Like, they really want to detach from reality to where, they indulge in, like, heavy drug use or something. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm saying it's important that I explore, other things that are appealing to my mind, things that I enjoy, and unfortunately, I do not find enjoyment in the outside world, because of that darkness. It's extremely. Uh, I don't like that feeling. I don't like the feeling of, the monitoring. I don't like the feeling of, the workplace and how it's become. And, I haven't been in a workplace since leaving, what is that place? Oh my gosh, the last place, the Laverne and Son place. Okay, yeah, I haven't been in a workplace since then. And it was one of those places, and I can't say that anyone mistreated me there, directly, other than, like, me coming to find out that it was him who caused that problem. And this is when everything just spiraled out of control, because there's a lot of, deep wounds and stuff that have been caused throughout this whole process. And, I do know that, he would get on my nerves and stuff like that at work. But, with him not really paying attention to what the employees were doing, I could tell that there was some sort of political undercurrent, in the workplace. But I just, but at the same time, I didn't mind going in every morning and doing my work. And I did like my little office setup because I had my, my cute little stuff in there. And it was like, I'm fine. I was content. Anyway, I am going to be working more on the moral reset after I get up. I don't know what I'm going to get up. And I do not want my sleeping pattern to get messed up just because I'm not working. It's to function like this, to where people are, working, and then they're off from work, and then they have to get up and work again, and then they have to get off from work, and then they have to look for work. It's I mean, I hope things can get better. I hope that this sort of this fluctuation, you know, I think that's extremely disappointing for people. It's not like they sit here and when they're kids and think, man, I can't wait to get to this point where I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, or just kind of pacing around, wondering what's going on all the time. I have never really had consistency in my life, and it's just tiring, you know. But yeah, I enjoy creating content and stuff, but it just gets, you know, it's how it feels having to deal with, the shadow banning, the that sort of stuff. It's like it's God, it's like, how in the world could somebody, I don't know, I don't know, you know what I mean? Um, it gets to be too much sometimes. Anyway, but I have been, thinking more about, what do you call it? More paranormal type things, you know what I mean? Like, I'm more interested in searching more and asking more questions, meditating on questions about my past lives, and those people that are connected to me, like, for example, my father. I understand that he was King Tut, but I wonder exactly how deep this connection goes. I know it's a heavenly type thing, but it's quite fascinating to me. So, and then also, I wish I could master, astral projection. I have tried in different methods throughout the years, and hopefully, if I do master it, I will definitely let you know. But, and then of course, there's sewing projects that I'd like to pick up at home, that I've put away. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy my home. And when it gets to the point where people try to enforce their stuff into the private life of a person, it becomes very threatening to a person, and it can damage a person psychologically. It's like, that's why there has to be boundaries. That's why we have the law. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say. But anyway, I'm gonna put I'm gonna put the cartoon Dicky Moe in the description box if you're interested in checking it out. I actually find that cartoon very funny. I used to love Tom and Jerry. Um, there was two different kinds of versions of Tom and Jerry. There was Tom and Jerry when they first came out. I think they were associated with MGM at the time. Okay, and then at some point they were taken over by Hanna-Barbera, and I think it's when back in the 70s where, like, they made it so that Tom and Jerry were friends. Okay, I didn't really dig on that. I always kind of liked it when Tom and Jerry had that little animosity thing going, like when they first came out. You know what I mean? I believe that was like in the 1950s. Anyway, Dicky Moe was actually created, I think, I think it was 1962. Yeah, 1962. So I remember watching this cartoon when I was younger, and I always thought it was, I don't know. It's surreal, It's surreal, but it's kind of funny. I don't know if you have that kind of humor. Anyway, the link will be in the description box. Take care. Good night.